Well, at the time that the idea of cable was broached in the province, we really didn't have that much access to television.
Back in those days, if you lived in Regina, television meant either CKCK TV or CBC TV. We had two channels.
You usually had to either have an antenna on your roof that was aimed in the right direction for one, but not both, television stations. Or you had rabbit ears, and that meant you had to move the rabbit ears to find the television station signal clear.
We were more than ready for cable television when Provincial Service Minister John Brocklebank unveiled a provincial cable television policy in October of '72. The policy outlined a system that was to be operated as a public utility, with SaskTel owning and installing all the cable hardware. This would prove to be a contentious issue between the Saskatchewan government and the CRTC regulations, which state that a cable company must own their own amplifiers, drops, and head end.
The provincial government of the day was adamant that SaskTel should be the deliverer of cable services in the province. And of course that wasn't going to happen because there was no telephone company across Canada that had a cable license.
It was a really complicated kind of process because, of course, you had various levels of government arguing about whether the responsibility for such a thing as cable to the home should be a provincial, a local, a national.
What they did was to offer cooperatives who were formed to submit applications, and the successful ones would be given a guaranteed grant of $3 million to proceed with an application. In Regina, there was a meeting held at Miller High School in the gymnasium there. There were 3 groups that appeared in front of a selection committee, and the Regina Cablevision Cooperative Group was the one that got the nod.
The Regina Cablevision Cooperative is a very unique kind of an animal. It is a cooperative of community organizations, in part, which hadn't been done before.
I knew a fair amount about television because I had worked in television before that, but I didn't know anything about cooperatives. That was a really interesting process because we actually, those of us who were chosen for the committee, went through a learning process. We had seminars and people from co-ops came and told us how it could work with the cable organization.
Heading up the application from a legal point of view, Dr. John Becky. But John's PhD was in communications law. A chap from Ottawa, Keith Smiley, looked after the technical aspects of the application. And Mr. Ed Giebert with Sherwood Credit Union looked after the financial aspects that we put into the application.
It was a Sunday in October of '75, and final touches were still being made on the application.
The next day was the deadline for the application submission. And I got a call from John Becky's office, and John said, "Fred, you have to get down here. We will have the application ready for you when you arrive." So my wife, my kids drove me down to John's office, and it wasn't ready. And so he says to me, "Just go to the airport and get on the airplane. We'll get it to you." So away I went to the airport, got a ticket, got on the airplane, and I thought I was going on a free ride to Ottawa because I had no application. And just as the plane was about to leave the dock, Air Canada attendant walked in the door with 2 bundles that she handed to me, and they were the applications that were to go forward.
The CRTC hearings went as scheduled on February 9th, 1976. Cable Regina was only one of 8 groups making application in the province, including SaskTel. Cable Regina was successful because of its structure and philosophy. Cable Regina would not pay dividends to investors. Instead, it would reinvest profits to improve service to subscribers and maintain and expand its community programming channel.
One of the main things was to be able to get customers on in order to have cash flow to meet the financial obligations.
Just after we received the license in the following year, 1977, another entity had came onto the scene, Co-operative Programming Network, to confuse issues even more for the public. Before we ever got operational, they got operational, and we had to go head on head with them. We began a push for subscribers. In other words, people could subscribe early. You could have a form that they could fill out, send $20 along with that form, and you'd come to their house when you were coming down the street, first of all. Well, amazingly enough, we had over 20,000 people who had given us $20 to be the first on their block. Co-operative Programming Network, we're not getting the numbers.
CPN went bankrupt. Cable licensees Moose Jaw, Regina, and Saskatoon bought the assets of CPN in 1979.
When Cable Regina started, I was working with a company called Dome Advertising. As their graphics person, I got to design the logo and design early advertising material. The type style and everything for the logo just happened to be called Cable.
Demand for television coverage had been so pent up that when it was announced that we did have something called Cable Regina, everybody was either on the telephone taking orders or out in the field installing cable.
Our girls would regularly, answer the phone, take an order, hang the phone up, answer the phone, take an order, hang the phone up. And they would stay on the phone for 45 minutes, and then they would go into the bathroom and cry for 15 minutes, and then they'd go back on the phones again. And that went on not just for days, but for weeks and months.
I look back on it now and say, well, could have we planned better? Could have we been better prepared? But I don't think we anticipated any kind of, near any kind of the response that we did receive.
Cable Regina went on the air February 15th, 1978 with 7 channels. It brought a world of entertainment to some 1,700 subscribers in the city.
I actually distinctly remember, I think it was 1978 or 79, I was still in high school, and excitedly waiting for the cable guy to come hook the cable up at our house.
The best thing was walking into people's houses. You had 7 channels to give them. I mean, when you think of the hundreds that are there now today, when you walked in and you hooked that cable up to the back of that TV, and you would end up with a crystal clear picture. And they were used to working off that antenna. It was, the look on their face was like, oh, I'll never give this up.
In the first 6-month period, or 7-month period, from February the 15th till the end of August in 78, we had connected and were billing in excess of 18,000 people. By the time we had reached year 2, we had climbed to 29,000. I was hired in August of 1975 on a part-time basis by the cooperative, and at that time we had a very small office out at the university, thanks to the good graces of the people at the university who were a member of the cooperative, of course. Once we had obtained the license, we moved to a new location on 11th Avenue.
We started out in the very beginning in a building on the corner of McIntyre and 11th Avenue.
We had a window front that was fabulous, and this was the cable company that was coming to Regina, and of course I was pleased about that because the buses would have to come by there, everybody going home.
We had 1 camera, and we took it for everything.
Well, one of the most fascinating things about community programming for television is all this mysterious equipment.
The first piece of equipment which was seen and used out in the community was our 1-camera portable camera system. It's completely battery contained. It's been up in airplanes, it's been on a Ferris wheel, it's come down a slide.
It was a very pop and mom sort of operation. And then from there, we went to the Co-op food store, which was on Albert Street, and we were in the basement of the Co-op food store.
At our production facility, which is location has been mentioned in the basement of the Sherwood Food Mart, there's an editing facility which allows us to take video material and work with it. to determine what is selected and put it in a proper order to formulate the program.
We had one van that we took out for things.
We were so excited with that first unit.
And we started out with a brand new mobile that had paint so fresh that it still smelled out of the body shop, having just arrived off the train the day before our first live Travelers Day parade.
The mobile facility was designed with community participation as a key point of its features. The equipment we put in that unit is very easily usable by community members.
From there, we moved out to Park Street, across from the Leader Post.
We were getting bigger and more people and more things to do.
We had always wanted to purchase the outside cable distribution system, and by August of 1986, after some serious negotiating, we signed an agreement with SaskTel to purchase the plant for $8 million. This purchase underlined our philosophy of service to the community.
We had outgrown our facilities at 1911 Park Street up the road, and the St. Thomas school site was here at Park and Arcola, and the separate school board had closed that school and were subsequently selling it. So we thought it would be a good fit for Access Communications, a place to put a facility that would be big enough for us, custom built, enough parking for staff, and at the same time put some green space back into the community.
Joe Pettick was our architect. I loved Joe. He was so much fun to work with. His eyes popped and he just had ideas continuously, and he created a building that obviously will last for years.
It was the first time that cable had been in a place that was made specially for it and specially for the purpose of producing cable television.
Times change, needs and expectations change, and in a highly competitive environment, there's a lot of other companies ready and waiting to meet the needs of our customers.
Nothing stands still in this business, which makes it a challenge, but it makes it very interesting.
When teletheater was introduced into Regina, we were using a positive trap system to deliver the service. This is not the most secure of systems. So when the first pay services were to be introduced, services like First Choice, C Channel, and Super Channel, we employed the Oak Communications Sigma system. This brought us a much higher level of security.
When the Sigma first came, I'm not going to say it was trouble, but there was some confusion. I walked into people's homes and put the TV on channel 3 so that it would work. You just don't know how many times. And they'd apologize and everything else. It wasn't their fault. It was new and it was exciting.
When I started on the board in '98, cable TV was the predominant service. There was a small amount of telecom customers, I think at that time 5,000, and internet was in its infancy.
People forget that before 1994, there were no websites. Internet was rare, right? There was barely email.
I remember sitting with one of the previous chairs of the board, Victor Martins, at a board meeting, and he was explaining to me how he had broadband. I didn't really even know what that was at that point. I don't think anyone really saw how quickly that was going to change as far as the transition from predominantly cable TV to how big a player the internet was going to become in our business, and how, I guess, blended all these services were going to become. Previously, the cooperative had been operating as pretty much a monopoly, and it was just getting into a bit of a competitive environment with some of the satellite services, and there was a wireless service provider.
SaskTel is stepping into new territory. It's now Regina's newest cable TV provider.
The level of growth that was achieved and the changes in the industry. Like I said, from '98 to 2004, the fact that we started as Cable Regina, finished as Access Communications, the growth, the huge growth of internet provision to customers, and the change in the competitive landscape. It was night and day from when I began to when I finished.
We could see that high-speed internet was going to be a valuable product in the future. We'd been thinking about home telephone and home security systems and becoming a true telecommunications business instead of just a cable television business.
When I became CEO back in 2000, we're coming out of a couple of challenging years. We posted a loss in 2000 and 2001. And the board and I felt at the time that we needed to do two things. One was to celebrate who we were, a cooperative. The second thing we wanted to do was to grow the cooperative outside kind of the traditional boundaries, both organic growth and geographic growth.
Weyburn and Estevan had a unique situation. We were one of the first communities in Western Canada to have cable television, and prior to even the larger cities of Regina, Saskatchewan, Moose Jaw, because our geographic proximity to the United States. And that allowed us to put up the 1,000-foot receiving antenna that we had in Weyburn was one of the largest towers in Western Canada.
In 1997, Cable Regina made an offer to purchase the cable systems in Weyburn, Estevan, and White City. So that was the beginning of the expansion.
The employees here saw it as a great opportunity to enhance our services that we're providing, as well as long-term security.
I think we made a very good impression with the Weyburn Estevan people. I think we showed up on time. I think that was huge to them. One lady said, "Oh, I didn't expect you this morning." I said, "Well, we're booked between 10 and 12. She said, "I know, but really, when are you really showing up?" I said, no, we'll show up on time.
I was doing a fair bit of work for Northeastern Cable in Yorkton, leading up to that changeover when the business was sold to Cable Regina, now Access. Access had, by and large, the same kind of corporate culture, the same community interest, the same community involvement as Northeastern Cable had.
On April 17th, Cable Regina embarked on one of the most significant changes in our history, taking on a new identity and shaping a more dynamic corporate image. Today, we're known as Access Communications.
There was a lot of work. It effectively occurred overnight as far as the transition went. But there was a lot of discussion around the board table, certainly a lot of work that was done by the administration on this. And we wanted the name to be something that was going to be indicative and representative of the cooperative going forward, and that would take into things into account that would be taking place in the future.
And Cable Regina became Access Communications back in 2000. We had expanded the cable delivery system beyond Regina. It was in Weyburn and Estevan and White City.
The Battlefords Community Cablevision Cooperative was a fellow cooperative in the province, and we've been cooperating and sharing ideas and best practices for a number of years. They ran into a bit of trouble. We proposed that we amalgamate the two cooperatives. At the end of the day, I think the community ownership and the community of the Battlefords and the communities that they served recognized that the merger was the best way to preserve community ownership. Both cooperatives approved that merger and made a much stronger organization after that.
When we did the Persona acquisition, I think we got almost 200 systems. That was huge.
Persona had owned systems all throughout Western Canada. Eventually, Eastlink, a company based in Halifax, became the owners of those systems. And we felt strongly that we wanted to be part of rural Saskatchewan, so we approached Eastlink.
Jim was up talking, and he had little blue dots all over the Saskatchewan's little map. Somebody hit the button, and the thing added 180, more dots. I think I almost passed out.
We were able to purchase some very vibrant communities in the province of Saskatchewan, whether it's Nipawin or Humboldt or Maple Creek or Shaunavon. It truly gave us a provincial footprint.
The acquisition of Little Loon Wireless has provided us with an opportunity to reach far more people in smaller communities and also on the farm.
There's been a huge pent-up demand for a quality broadband internet product in rural Saskatchewan, and we've been able to tap into that demand and provide access level of service to our rural customers.
Access Communications remains a highly successful community-owned Saskatchewan cooperative, and this is due to the collective efforts of a great many people.
Cooperation is the way that we've been able to make the whole thing work.
We are Saskatchewan-based, Saskatchewan-focused, a cooperative that reinvests retained earnings back into the community, into the services we provide.
Access Communications has been supporting United Way's across the province for many years, and United Way is proud to be among them. And I think one of the foundational pieces of our relationship is being a nonprofit and both a cooperative organization, is that our partnership and relationship is rooted in those shared values.
We're integral to the community. We're not sitting outside here, run by somebody else for the community. We're in the community. And to me, that's what made it really different.
The thing that I think makes Access different from other cable providers in our market and outside our market is our Community Channel 7.
Community programming is not only part of the raison d'etre for Access Communications, but a distinct competitive advantage, as many of our competitors cannot or choose not to operate community channels.
What we did was to start and build a community programming department from the ground up. There was one camera, which we still have now at this point, 6 years later. We use it more as a museum piece, I think, than anything else, but it is still around. And I saw the footage the other day, the very first show we ever shot, and actually it looks as good now as it did then. It looks a lot better than some I've seen since.
The first video production, The Queen's Visit to Regina, was shot with a single camera.
We made every effort that we could to make sure that we were representing the community and doing what the community wanted.
People are always interested in seeing, what their neighbors are doing, what their kids are doing, what's happening in the community. So the community programming part had a very major impact.
We started out with interview programs. We had one camera in those days, the 30-30, and we would take that out and just ride a bus route and shoot film as you went along. That was very popular for some reason.
Access would come to each school in our entire community and record these Christmas concerts. That was a big deal.
Covered things at churches, community events, pretty much the same as is done now, but with much higher technology than we ever had then. From the very, very beginning, it was volunteers who did the heavy lifting for cable in the province.
We've encouraged community groups to be as active as possible with the shooting of their productions, right to the point of training numerous community people to do their own camera work.
Without the community, Channel 7 really would be nothing, because we depend on them for all of our programming.
Cable Regina started as a community venture, really heavily relying on volunteers.
There's a great camaraderie involved in producing something like this and putting something together. So for 40 years, volunteers have been the backbone, done the heavy lifting for this.
The joys of volunteering that I get out of it are just meeting people, and creating friends.
We're definitely a big family at United Way. We have fun doing the United Way Telethon that they have every year.
The things that we feel good about is the monies that we helped raised through United Way telethons in both Estevan and Weyburn.
There's a lot of, especially seniors, people who can't make it down to the telethon. They can't listen to it on the radio, so this allows us to be in their living rooms.
We had the Rotary Carol Festival that we covered, and it's a tremendous success. And all the people that are involved in that make that happen, I just can't say enough.
I was involved in that from the very first time. It's still one of my favorite programs. Someone would call and say, my grandmother is in the hospital and she can't go to the Carol Festival. And her granddaughter is singing in the Carol Festival. And when is it going to be on? Because she may not be home. And we'd say, well, tell us when she can watch television and we'll put it on, which actually had happened a couple of times where we broadcast on demand long before they ever thought of it. So we really did try to serve the public.
The opportunity to feel that you're really doing something for the community, I think that's been a big part of the success of Cable Regina and of all the people that work in it.
Access Communications is a cooperative, and we operate under the co-op model. The co-op model involves giving back to the communities that we serve.
We're a values-driven organization, and one of our core values, or guiding principles, if you like, is community and commitment to community.
Our department started the Salvation Army dinner. A few of us got together and thought it would be fun, so we came up with the menu and divided up all the dishes.
Today is our 25th annual Access Communications Christmas luncheon in support of the Salvation Army here in Regina.
And it's good to give back to the community.
We've been able to support, over the last number of years, over 1,600 organizations each year. We've been able to raise well over $200,000 for the food bank over the last number of years through a show and shine, and support the collector's car hobby at the same time.
One of the ways that we give back to the communities that we serve is through our Access Children's Fund. The Access Children's Fund has raised over $1.7 million for children's charities in access communities right around the province of Saskatchewan. TV Bingo is the reason that the Access Children's Fund today is one of the largest children's charity donators in the province. It takes a lot of people to run TV Bingo each and every Saturday afternoon, and we just couldn't do it without the volunteers that support us. Over the 20 years that I've spent here at Access Communications, I've seen us go from a simple mom and pop, small-time cable television provider in the city of Regina to what we are today.
We're in well over 240 communities, right from the north to the south to Manitoba to Alberta. We've got 300 employees, 200 volunteers, many hundreds of members. We're offering telephony service now, both business and residential, TV, traditional TV products, and home security, and of course broadband internet. And we consider a fifth product our wireless broadband internet in rural Saskatchewan.
It's never been a dull moment working here. It's just constantly changing and growing, and no day is the same as the next. That makes it a wonderful place to work.
Access has just been a great place to work for all these years, and I enjoyed myself immensely.
I really believe Access Communications makes Saskatchewan a better place. And we do that by giving back to community, we do that by providing value to our customers, and we do that by community programming. And we do it by providing customer service that's best in class.
When I look ahead and you say, what's going to happen in another 40 years, I have no idea except that I'm sure whatever form it takes, it's going to be a positive thing, it's going to be cooperative, and it's going to be very Saskatchewan.
We've been extraordinarily successful over those 40 years, and it's worth saying thank you to the communities that we're able to serve, the customers that have been loyal to us over the number of years, the employees that have work here today and have worked here in the past, even the volunteers. I always want to give them a big hug when I see them here, so that's why we're successful.
Congratulations, Access Communications. Cable Regina, 40 years. I've been fortunate enough to be a part of it for 28, and probably got a few more left in me.
Well, it's been a great evening here at the Access Communications 40th. All the best to the future. Things are obviously going very well for this cooperative. It was great to be part of it in the early days, and wishing you all the best in your future.
Happy birthday, Access. 40 years, I knew you when.
Kudos to you.